Slavery has existed in Thedas for thousands of years, and is still very common today, despite being only legal in Tevinter. Very likely the first occurrence of slavery was, of course, in Elvhenan, damn elves coming here stealing all the world firsts. They had a very strict and oppressive class-based system, kinda like Orlais now, but with more magic and slaves. Dreamer mages were obviously at the top, because why wouldn't they be? If you could throw fireballs on people, they probably wouldn't want to oppose you. During the height of Elvhenan, slaves and refugees poured into a sanctuary created by Thedas, where their wounds would be tended and their valasline removed. Alongside the Dread Wolf, they took up arms against their former masters, and when the empire eventually fell, former slaves killed any dreamer mage they could find. Because people are shit, after Elvhenan fell to bits, the elves were enslaved by the Tevinter Imperium, and since people are also racists, the elves were looked down upon and treated as less than human, literally. Given that they've been around for a metric fuckton of years, slaves have played a pretty prominent role in history. Andraste, for one, was a slave herself. But also the elves that followed her against the Imperium, led by Shartan, have been freed slaves. The Imperium even went so far to make up a name for those sniveling coward elves. Rattus, as Cory informs us so kindly, is a very, very kind descriptive term of their most despised slaves. Despite not being at such a high level, it still holds up today, as evident by the presence of alienages and the treatment of elves in the Imperium and elsewhere. Fun fact, Tevinter actually abolished slavery very briefly. Problem is that the banning of slavery could have caused potentially catastrophic damage to the imperial economy, so the Archon that made this law was quickly dealt with by means of daggers, and they reinstated slavery. People who were not born in the Imperium, but still wish to become citizens, must indenture themselves to the service of a Tevinter citizen, essentially selling themselves into slavery for the promise of a future citizenship. Brilliant idea, Fiona. Free people, however, may also sell themselves into slavery to provide for their families. How exactly that seems a good alternative to just being poor, I don't know. But of course it wouldn't be the Imperium if the state itself wouldn't also own slaves. Not talking about the employment office though. Those state-owned slaves are called servus publicus, because Tevin is just a bastardized version of Latin. Literally fucking means public servant as well, by the way. Private-owned slaves have the advantage of being able to be set free, on paper. To be set free, a slave owner must, in front of a judge, agree to set them free or die and have that in their will. After that, a former slave becomes a liberati, which again literally means freed. Fuck's sake. Being a liberati means you're free, but mostly fucked. They can own property and serve as an apprentice in a trade. They're not citizens, they can't join the military, and they can't even fuck around in politics. So mostly like a modern day apprentice. Slaves that show magical talent must be trained, otherwise their owner might one day find an abomination in their quarters, and that commonly isn't good for business. They are then able to join the Circle of Magi. Problem is that Tevinter is still racist, so good luck with that. To the surprise of no one, dwarves aren't any better than the stinky surfacers, however. Remember golems? Yeah? Those used to be dwarves. Except that golems are even worse because a slave still retains freedom of thought and may refuse to follow an order. Golems can't. If you hold the control rod, you could order them to set fire to an orphanage. Not that I would, recently. Quite ironically, however, the person responsible for creating golems in the first place was made into one himself. Talk about poetic justice. In the Imperium, however, dwarves aren't kept as slaves, officially. That is most likely because of their long-standing relationship with them, and the fact that they are the main source of lyrium for the Imperium. Not that the Venatori care, however, as they kept dwarven slaves in the hissing wastes. Before we go on, honorable mention also goes out to the Antivan crows. As Zevran tells us, it's common for the crows to buy slaves and train them into elite assassins, essentially enslaving them. But they are free to choose, Fuzo. They're free to choose between serving the crows, or leaving and being hunted like Fenris. I mean Zevran. That's slavery, my dude. Qunari follow suit with the dwarves and use a substance called kamek, which turns people into mindless labor slaves. Qunari really do waste nothing, man. With Dragon Age 4 on the horizon of a planet about 40 light years away, we got lots of time to talk or speculate about all sorts of stuff. Let me know what you want to see, so I don't have to think for myself. As always, if you enjoyed it, subscribe. If for some reason you want to contact me, send me a PM on Reddit. And if you want updates and sometimes cake pictures, follow me on Twitter.